I'd like to do a follow-up to the previous video that I made 2 weeks ago about the Russian-Ukrainian conflict by providing more background and context to the Russian-Ukrainian war that's been raging for over a month. So to begin with, the Ukrainian rebel army, which was led by Stepan Bandera, was allied with Nazi Germany at first during World War II. Then when they decided they wanted independence, Hitler threw him in prison, and the rebel army fought both the Soviet army and the German army. After the war was over, the CIA and the Cold War began, the CIA decided to use the Ukrainian nationalists as a Cold War weapon. So there was an operation like Operation Paperclip with former Nazi German scientists like Werner von Braun, who invented the rocket program for NASA. Similar thing was done with the Ukrainian Nazis and war criminals. It's called Operation Aerodynamic. So for example, Nikola Lebed, who was responsible for a big massacre in Volyn in 1943, was completely exonerated and not charged at Nuremberg. Instead, he became a CIA asset with that Operation Aerodynamic. So that started in 1949. It involves throwing leaflets in Western Ukraine to encourage the uprising. Of course, weapons training, and it encouraged Ukrainian nationalism. The big split happened, I suppose, in 1991 when George H.W. Bush gave his Chicken Kiev speech, trying to encourage Ukraine to remain part of the Soviet Union.
And I've come here today to say we support those who explore the frontiers of freedom. We will join these reformers on the path to what we appropriately call a new world order.
In 91, Ukraine declared independence anyway, and the Russian president at the time, Boris Yeltsin, accepted the current borders, even though they were drawn up by the communists and included almost a third of Russians within those borders. And after that, Ukraine became kind of a battleground between Russian and US influence under the Kuchma presidency. They sold some weapons to Iraq, making them kind of a pariah state. But eventually George Soros's Open Society Foundation gave $5 million to teach Ukrainians how to do street protests and how to do nonviolent resistance, which led to the Orange Revolution of 2004, and Viktor Yushchenko, whose wife was suspected of being a CIA asset, to be president. Under the Yushchenko government, lots of Russian schools were being closed in the Donbas region, which is where the rebels are today, and that began to create a very pro-Russian sentiment. And even back then there were calls for separatism, for Donbas to create the Donbas Krivorog Republic. And the tug of war continued until 2014 when the Euromaidan protest, with encouragement of Senator John McCain, who was there, and CIA Director John Brennan was there, and Victoria Nuland, who is now Undersecretary of State. They all encouraged the protests, and they even picked the next Prime Minister, Yatsenyuk, who was always criticized for spending more time in the US Embassy than with his electors. And a very good documentary by Oliver Stone called Ukraine on Fire has now been flagged by YouTube 3 times for being controversial, because it does give the other story about the Nazi background of the Ukrainian nationalists, their red and black flag, which means blood and land, and the fact that Ukraine's best quality is being able to switch sides, as they are a borderland between East and West. They switched sides between Poland to Russia under Bogdan Khmelnytsky in the 17th century. Then they switched sides to Sweden from Russia in the 17th century. And this continued on and continues to this day. This was always disputed land. And another interesting saying was modern neo-Nazis is that at first YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram didn't allow pro-Nazi content like the Azov Battalion and the Right Sector, which are armed militias in Ukraine and have been incorporated into the Ukrainian army. But now, because we have always been at war with East Asia, like in George Orwell's book, the ban has been reversed, and now it's okay to donate to these groups, to watch their content. The SS symbols are not a big deal anymore. And about the current president, Vladimir Zelensky, he was elected as a peace candidate, ironically, to negotiate with Putin and bring peace, because he was a comedian. He actually played a president on a TV show called Sluga Naroda, which means servant of the people. But after he became president, the crazy pro-Nazi nationalists, they said they wouldn't follow his orders. They would not withdraw from the Donbass region, from the disputed regions. And there were many demonstrations against him, and he just caved in because he's more scared of them than he is of Russia. The main sponsor is a Ukrainian oligarch named Igor Kolomoisky. Ukraine is basically an oligarch. He was about 10 men controlling 90% of the economy, all the old Soviet enterprises. And he owned a TV station where Zelensky was a comedian, and he owned a bank. And he created one of those militias. The Azov Battalion was his own money when he was governor of Dnipropetrovsk, which is a central region that's behind the front lines right now. This war has been a really big blessing for his political career, because his ratings were in the low 20s, lower than Joe Biden's is at this moment. So because he was very unpopular for the COVID response, and he has jailed opposition leaders like Medvedchuk, who was the head of the pro-peace, pro-life party. He was put under house arrest, and his TV channel was shut down. But Zelensky has become a hero to the Ukrainian people on the same level as the Nazi collaborator Stepan Bandera was, or Roman Shushkevich, or any historical figures, because of something called the rally around the flag effect. It was the same in World War II when Winston Churchill became very popular. Same was George W. Bush having 90% approval ratings after September 11th. This completely erased all his corruption allegations, with him having some secret bank accounts, as all the Ukrainian presidents tend to do.
Is what they do worthwhile? Come on, man.
So what sounded like a wild conspiracy theory at first about Ukraine having biolabs, even I was very skeptical of it, turned out to be completely true. And we can see that the deep state didn't get their story straight, as Victoria Nuland said that they're just biological research places.
Does Ukraine have chemical or biological weapons?
Ukraine has biological research facilities.
While Jen Psaki completely denied it.
Russia has a history also of inventing outright lies like this, which is the suggestion that the United States has a chemical and biological weapons program.
Shows that the American deep state has a vested interest in using Ukraine as a playground for its defense industry and its pharmaceutical industry, because they obviously don't care if another virus outbreak happens, just like what happened with COVID and the research labs in China. Who cares if an anthrax lab gets out and kills some Ukrainians? They're just resources to be exploited by the deep state, because in Ukraine you can get away with a lot more. In the past, under George W. Bush, it was alleged that Ukraine was being used as a black site for CIA torture, as a law, because they don't have a Bill of Rights in Ukraine. They lied about those weapons of mass destruction 20 years ago in Iraq. They lied about President Trump and the Russian collusion hoax. So you should look critically at the stories they tell, because it's in their interest to continue to sell weapons to Ukraine and send aid, because they probably get a cut of it, like the whole big guy scandal that Hunter Biden's tape exposed was Joe being the big guy and getting a percent of it. So of course they're going to try to build up Ukraine as being stronger than they really are, because they want this conflict to continue and make Russia into the devil, into the adversary. So these Ghost of Kiev stories that use the video game to generate it, and then the Snake Island story about the Ukrainian border guards being killed was not true. All those border guards surrendered, and they were treated humanely by Russia. So any claim, the hardest thing to understand about war, as a man named Gary Bretcher said, the radio war nerd, is getting past the PR departments of both sides, because both ministries of defense have a vested interest in making themselves look good. So take any claims about success or defeats or casualties with a dose of skepticism. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. And I would just like to say that it's not a justification for Russia invading it, but this is not a black and white story as war propaganda tends to paint everything. In the Czech Republic, for example, they now have made it a crime to say anything good about Russia. And just the other night, Tulsi Gabbard was accused of being a Russian asset just for questioning the official narrative. So keep your head on your shoulders. Do not give temptation to rush to judgment, because things are not what they appear to be.